Hey guys, this is Carl, and today I'm going to show you how to fix the 4-wheel drive actuator on your second generation Toyota Tacoma. Let's get started.
This is what it would look like on your dash when you try to turn on 4-wheel drive and it no longer works. So the first thing you gotta do is lift up the front of the truck. Here I'm using rhino ramps. It's just so much easier than using a jack and jack stands, so you're not breaking your back, or maybe I'm just lazy. That's probably more the answer. So once it's jacked up, make sure you chock the back. The next thing you do here is you remove the front skid plate. That's pretty easy because all you have to do is unscrew the 4 bolts that hold it in place. Just make sure you're also securing the skid plate as you're undoing the bolts. The 4-wheel drive actuator is right behind that front jack point, and the first thing we're going to do is remove the hose designated by the blue arrow, remove the wire harness designated by the black arrow, and remove the 4 bolts that hold it in place, which you'll see with the red arrow. Here I'm using needlenose pliers to loosen the hose, and then a flathead screwdriver to completely remove it from the 4-wheel drive actuator. Here we remove the wire harness by squeezing it and then wiggling it off. The next thing you do is start undoing the bolts on the bottom of that actuator. These two are pretty easy since those 2 bolts are really accessible to that ratchet. This is where it becomes a pain in the ass. So the upper passenger side, you have to wiggle that ratchet in place, and then here I'm using my right hand to push it and my left hand to ratchet it. So on the driver's side you basically do the same thing. Here I switched angles. So here I'm pushing with my left hand and now I'm ratcheting with my right hand. You loosen the actuator from the differential by using a rubber mallet. Do it carefully and make sure you have a bucket underneath to catch all of that differential fluid. Once the actuator is completely free from differential, you should be able to rock it back and forth and slowly and carefully remove it from between the jack point and the differential. Here I use penetrant oil to help loosen those screws, and then you just undo the screws afterwards. Once you remove the screws, I use a small flathead screwdriver and slowly pry around that plastic housing. Careful not breaking the actual gasket that keeps it sealed. Here you solder the electrical connections on that small electric motor. From what I read in the forums, the electric motor has a tendency of breaking loose from that connection point. So I'm just beefing up those connection points by soldering them in place. And once it's soldered in place, you'll see that I'm using one of those portable car jumper to test that the connection points are working properly. The next thing I do is I take some white lithium grease and just get it all over the place. I put it in that worm gear there, and then I put it all over the 3 gears in the metal part of the housing. So I put it in the small gear and then spin it around to get onto the bigger gear. Same thing with that partial black gear there on the bottom. The next thing you do is just reassemble that whole actuator assembly. So as you can see, the housing's back on, and I'm putting the screws back in place, and I'm using a little bit of anti-seize to put those screws back, because to tell you the truth, I actually didn't shoot this part where I'm trying to undo those screws, but they were so difficult. I had to use a locking needle nose plier and really muscle the hell out of it. And one of the screws here, you'll notice on the bottom right, it's missing because I actually ended up shearing that head off. and I had to drill it out, and yeah, I have to do something to secure that side, but I'll keep that to myself. So once that's done, I just use some contact cleaner so that those electrical contacts are clean from debris and grease. Afterwards, I apply a small bead of red gasket maker. This is the high temperature stuff, all the way around that mating surface of the actuator itself. Obviously, you gotta make sure that surface is prepared, so you remove the old gasket as well as clean the surface from grease or any type of debris. So you wiggle the actuator back in place and make sure the forks are in that groove. And once that's done, you put the 4 bolts back on. And basically what happens is with this high temperature sealant, you're supposed to only finger tighten those bolts, wait an hour, and then torque them down completely. And also on top of that, you have to wait full 24 hours before you fill the differential again with the actual fluids. Here I use the contact cleaner to also clean the harness itself. Obviously you gotta wait for it to dry, shake off the excess, and once that's all dry, you just push it in place back to where it was sitting before. And don't forget to also put the air hose back in place. And finally, use a torque wrench and torque all 4 bolts to proper spec. Don't forget, wait 24 hours before you fill that front differential with fluid. And then once it's filled, you should be good to go. Thanks for watching, guys, and good luck with fixing your 4-wheel drive actuator.